Thank you. That's all for me, by the way. Don't get the wrong idea. Thank you all for coming out today. As most of you know, I think Senator Edwards provided some of probably the most memorable imagery of the 2004 campaign, which also I was reminded, thinking about this, inspired one of what I thought was one of the most memorable jokes of the 2004 campaign at the president's expense. Actually, it was on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and I'm not going to tell it as well as he did, but he basically said at one point, I don't know if you remember this, he basically said, Senator Edwards was back on the campaign trail today where he said there were two Americas, one for the very rich and one for everyone else, to which the president later responded, well, okay, you can be president of the crappy America, which we all need to have a sense of, they're good. We all need to have a sense of humor about even the most important issues in American life. Senator Edwards does. He's one of the truly good guys in American politics, for those of us who cover it. He cares very deeply about the less affluent in the country and has taken time off of a very grueling campaign schedule to be with us here today, and we appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be with you.
Let me start. I want to ask you, you have a really interesting personal journey to talk about, I think, from your entry into politics until where you've come to now and what you've learned. Before I do that, I think there's a question that's on most people's minds here, and I know you hear it a lot. How is Mrs. Edwards? How is your family?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. And let me say first, we're very appreciative of all the people, both in New York and around the country, who've been so supportive of Elizabeth and our families. We've gone through these struggles, but Elizabeth's doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances. She's her usual brave, extraordinary self, and completely committed to this cause. And she's undergoing treatment, and we just have to see how it goes as we go forward. I mean, but based on everything we're seeing, both from her treatment and from the doctors that we're talking to, we're very optimistic.
Oh, that's good to hear. We all wish her well. And
Thank you.
I know everybody shares that sentiment.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, let me just take you back to the beginning of your sort of political life. You were in trial of, what, 20 years, roughly?
20 years, yeah.
You come to Washington as a senator in 1998. It's the first race you've run. It's the first elective office you've held. I always wondered, I never got the sense that you had a lot of fun being in Washington or necessarily being in the Senate. How was that time period for you?
It was, first of all, I came into the Senate in fairly remarkable times because as I was sworn into the Senate, the impeachment proceedings against the president were occurring.
Oh, right.
And one of the first things I did, in fact, the only thing virtually we did the first couple months that I was there, is I was one of the people put in charge of taking some of the testimony, presiding over some of the testimony that was taken from witnesses in regard to the impeachment proceeding. So I was very involved in that, which was very similar to what I'd spent my life doing because it was, in many ways functioning as a lawyer. So that plus speaking, the first time I spoke on the floor of the Senate was about the impeachment of the president, and it was a fairly serious thing. And I was in an unusual setting because most of the time when new senators speak, they're, as you've seen, and those of you who've seen this on C-SPAN, most of the time it's a senator speaking to a largely empty room and a few people in the gallery. That's just the reality of it, and that's the way most new senators speak. Well, in my case, I spoke from the well of the Senate with the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court behind me presiding and all the senators in their seat, and it was about the impeachment of the president. So when I first came in, it was a very different, exciting time. When the impeachment was over, the impeachment proceedings were over, then we went back to the business of legislating. And I think the way to describe it would be it was a great learning experience for me. There are some extremely good people in the Senate who've devoted their lives to public service. Things move slowly, and sometimes it feels glacial in its movement.
Like when you're watching it.
Yeah, exactly. That part of it was hard because I could see out in the world how many people were struggling and how much they were struggling, and it was painful for me to watch the process grind its way along when it was clear people needed help.
And the culture of Washington, the social culture,
I wasn't a big fan of the social culture. there's a lot of friendship among senators, which is a very healthy thing. That I liked and enjoyed. And the other thing that most people are deceived by, the men and women in the Senate work very hard. Right. I mean, they work long hours and they work extraordinarily hard. But the culture of Washington itself was not something I had great admiration for. I think there's a lot of unhealthiness in everything from the lobbyists to the cocktail parties to the fundraising, all of that, which is to me completely contrary to the way democracy is supposed to work.
Right. And almost as soon as you got there, people started to say, right, this was the peculiarity of the timing, right? This is the next Bill Clinton. This is the great political talent. This is the guy. You know, there was a lot of attention paid to you at that time. Did you come thinking, maybe I'll run for president in 6 years, or did people try to talk you into it? How did you come to that? Were you seduced by that discussion about you on some level?
No, I was trying not to mess up. I was not. I promise you, the last thing I was thinking about was running for president. I was trying to do my work, get my feet wet, learn what I had to do a good job in the Senate. And then what actually happened was in 2000, when Vice President Gore was choosing in the process of choosing his running mate, I was, and shockingly to me, one of the last people that he considered for that. And honestly, that sort of started the wheels turning about at least the possibility. Although I didn't have in my head, I wanted Al Gore to be elected president. So the last thing I was thinking about was, what would happen in 2004. I wanted Al Gore to be running for re-election in 2004. So, but that's what actually started the whole process of me thinking about that.
And so you decide to run for president, and I don't think none of us sitting in this room probably, and probably in the city right now perhaps, knows what it's like to go through this process. And you decide, you've been in the Senate a little while, you decide you want to explore running for president. The first thing you do, right, is hire a bunch of people who know more than you do about running for president.
Or claim they do.
Or claim they do. And you, everybody claims they do.
This will be a theme of this discussion.
Good. Most of the people here think they know more about you than running for president.
And some of them probably do.
But then you hire a bunch of people, you get in a room, right, and all of these people have done it before, and you have not. I imagine that's on some level a little intimidating. I imagine it's a little disorienting. What was that process like? Actually, you described it very well. I mean, you decide you want to do it because you believe it's the right thing to do. The first thing you do, of course, is talk to your family about whether it makes sense. And then you sit with people who've done it before, as you would do in virtually anything you choose to do in your life, because you want the value of their experience. And what you learn over time is that somebody else's experience for which they were paid in providing consultation in a political campaign is not the same thing as leadership. Leadership is having a clear set of beliefs and a vision and the backbone to stand behind it, no matter what's happening with the political wind. And that's something that you have to learn. I mean, it's not something you know instinctively. And when did that click in for you? Because there came a point during the campaign where you felt you knew more than they did, where you knew what direction you wanted to go. Right? Is that a fair assessment?
I can't tell you a precise moment in time. I know that we went through all of 2003, which is the equivalent of this year for those who are listening. 2003 would have been 2007, the year before the primaries. We went through most of 2003, and to some point in the latter parts of 2003, I think is when that happened.
And what advice had you gotten? Because you're a little bit bitter about this. I mean, not in an ugly way, right? But as you pointed out, you feel that those expertise are overvalued in some sense. What specifically were you advised that you came to realize was not the right course of action for you?
Well, I think it's more generic than specific. It is cautious, careful, don't make a mistake. That's something you can do something wrong, it will do you in. And you should engage in a careful calculation about every position you take. That's not leading, it's following. And what America, I believe, wants is we want leaders. We want people who have a strong belief system, who are willing to be honest about that belief system so that all voters know what it is, and then say what you want to do with it for the country, because your belief system is irrelevant except to the extent it affects the rest of the country. Right. And so how do you translate what it is you believe in your convictions into policies that affect America and affect the rest of the world? I mean, that's what people want to see in a presidential candidate. And it's one of the hard things for, I think, anybody who's running for president the first time. I think it applies to the people, and there are lots of them running for president the first time this time.
I don't know who you could be talking about.
Well, the Democrats and the Republicans. It's just, you have to learn your way alone. I mean, it's just, it doesn't, unless you've done it, it's something you have to learn process. So there's value in seasoning and having done it.
Was Iraq a part of this? Did you get advice around the cautionary advice around Iraq that you wish now you had not followed?
Around the vote itself or around the campaign?
Either.
The vote itself, I can tell you exactly what happened. I was on the Intelligence Committee. I was receiving information directly from the intelligence community there. I was meeting with a lot of high-level experts from the Clinton administration who had literally just gone out of office just shortly before this time. And those things were to provide factual information about what we thought was wrong, as it turned out, what we thought was happening inside Iraq, particularly with the development of chemical, biological, or even potentially nuclear weapons. In addition to that, I had a personal conflict because I was worried about Bush. I didn't trust him. I was nervous that he would not do the things he should do in the lead up to taking action on Iraq, and that he had an agenda. All those things created great internal conflict for me. The information about the weapons was consistent. Turned out to be consistently wrong, but it was consistent. And the feeling about Bush played a role. I remember the moment when I made the decision. I made that decision myself. That was not a decision made by political consultants. And so as a result of that, everyone listening knows I've said I was wrong about that. I have to accept the consequences of that and the responsibility. I can't blame that on somebody else. Now, as you go forward in the campaign, Iraq was like everything else. I mean, people were constantly giving you advice about how to talk about it, what you should do, about Iraq, about health care, about everything else. And what you learn is to trust yourself. If you believe that you should be president of the United States, you should have enough faith in yourself to trust what's inside you and to speak from here, inside you, about what it is you believe and what you want to do for the country and to live with the consequences of it.
Well, if you trust yourself, you don't need to raise all that money, right? Isn't all the money to pay people you trust?
Unfortunately, you got to raise the money. Otherwise, these people don't get to hear what you believe. That's the problem.
So this leads us to the general campaign in 2004. It's an interesting transition. You were thrown together now with Senator Kerry, who you've been opposing. I'm just curious. I mean, I think we're all curious on a human level what that's like.
I wouldn't say thrown.
Okay, well, you're right. Okay. Well, there wasn't another nominee for you to join, so you joined the ticket, and it's I think it's a curiosity for people who watch this process. Just between you and me and this audience and everybody watching on the web and everyone who will get the DVD, were you friends? Were you comfortable together? Did you develop a relationship after you went on the ticket?
I think we were not close before the campaign. John, I think, would say the same thing. We just not that we didn't like each other, we just didn't know each other very well. Right. I mean, most of our contact had been on doing some work together in the Senate and campaigning essentially against each other for the nomination. So most of our interaction had been conflict interaction. I had a lot of respect for him, but I didn't know him well personally. I didn't really know his family at all, except having met Teresa and some of his kids on the campaign trail. During the course of the campaign, we did become close. And you'd expect as you go through a war like that you become close to people.
Did he listen to too many consultants?
I think you'd have to ask him that question. I think that...
He's not here.
Yeah. True. But you're asking what whether he did something, and I don't think I can answer that question for him. I think he would answer that question very honestly for you. He always has for me, and I think he would for you. I don't mean that specific question, but any hard question. And so I think that when you get to the stage of being the nominee for president, this is another thing that seasoning and experience adds.
And he was doing it for the first time
Really
as well.
bad. He was doing it for the first time. You are inundated with people who want to help. Lots of people who have lots of experience in politics, people who have lots of experience in policy, people who've been involved in lots of presidential campaigns, people who've been involved in lots of presidential administrations, and they all want to help. And that's why it's crucial at that juncture to have a really clear view about yourself, comfortable with yourself, and a clear view about what you want to do as president. I do think that, I do believe and believe strongly John Kerry would have made a very good president.
And what do you think went wrong in that campaign from your perspective? You had a chance to learn, to watch it, to learn
Well,
from
there
it.
were a lot
Did
of...
nothing go wrong, or was there a reason that you lost?
Well, I'm not in the business of hyper-analyzing, looking back. You know, I think that this has been looked at carefully by people who weren't inside the war like I was. I think there's some things that are strategic decisions that it's like when you're in the middle of a battle, you got to make a decision and move on. You can't just keep revisiting things. And I'm sure that anybody who's gone through a presidential campaign will say, I wish I'd done this instead of that, even the campaigns that were successful. So I don't think me going back in hindsight and trying to analyze that's of much value.
You did not want to concede after that election night, is that right? I mean, the story is that you, more than anyone, said to Senator Kerry and to others, we should hold off, we should not concede this race right away.
Well, I'm trying to figure out a way not to answer this question.
Take your time. You really are unconsulted nowadays.
I think that my belief was that we had, I'll speak for myself, I had promised Democrats that if they voted, we would ensure that their vote was counted after the fiasco of 2000. And I thought there was an enormous amount at stake. And boy, you can see it right now with what's happening in Iraq and other things around the world. I thought there was a great deal at stake, and I thought we should do it in a dignified way. There was a great deal of controversy around some of the things that happened, for example, in Ohio. I thought it should be done the right way, in a dignified way. But my view was that we should ensure that every vote had been counted and counted correctly. And that was not, but I was not the presidential candidate. It was not my decision to make. And I had then still have enormous respect for Senator Kerry, who I think absolutely believed he did what was best for the country. I know that from my conversations with him when nobody else was listening. I mean, I know why he did it, and I know he did it for the right reasons. And they were very noble reasons. They were unrelated to himself. I had a different view.
And so then it ends, and you concede, it's over, and you went through Mrs. Edwards' diagnosis, which is a very sudden shock. You're no longer in the Senate. You pack up your boxes. You take them to North Carolina, and you have to figure out, you have to confront this question of, what do I do now with this next phase? Yeah. I know you gathered a lot of people around you. What was that? You had time to reflect, and what did that reflection lead you to think about? Well,
we actually sat around. We didn't leave Washington immediately. Elizabeth got her cancer treatment in Washington. And so there were lots of things going on at the same time. I mean, initially, because she was diagnosed the day after the election, we were very intensely involved, and I was very intensely involved in making sure that everything that could be done for her was being done. And that included, me making sure I was there for all the doctor's visits, doctor appointments, the sitting in the room with her when she had the chemotherapy going into her arm. And so we had a lot of attention focused on that. I was worried about her, and all of us were. And then second, trying to figure out what I would do in this period of time. And we sat around, Elizabeth was there, some of our friends were there, and talked about the possibilities. And when we finished, Elizabeth's the one who said, I listened to you, and the thing that you light up about is doing something about poverty in this country. And she had, of course, on a personal level, had heard me talk a great deal about this in the past. And she was right. And so I decided that's where the bulk of my time, or at least a big chunk of my time, would go.
Now, there's an interesting calculation or lack of calculation here, because all those people you talked about, the consultants, I'm sure a lot of people in the room thought, you don't run for president again on poverty. That's not an issue. And yet at the same time, and you and I have talked about it a little bit, when you do what you care about and not what other people think is a politic thing to do, there's a certain political benefit to that, because people see that you're doing what you believe in, right?
Yeah.
How did you parse that in your mind? I mean, did you basically say, I'm going to do this, and if it has political consequences, so be it, or did you feel it was actually a good political move as well as a good personal move for you?
I didn't know the answer to that question. I didn't know. I could see it going either way. And I felt like I wanted to first know more about the policy ideas for fighting poverty. I wanted to be more personally involved in seeing what was happening in low-income communities around the country. And that's where I wanted to spend my time and energy. That's why I started the Poverty Center at the University of North Carolina. And so that's why I wanted to do it. I think I can honestly say I had no idea what the political consequences would be one way or the other.
What do you think it is about that issue that motivates you so deeply? I mean, there are a lot of people who empathize and see poverty and care about it. What is it that makes that a driving, decisive issue for you?
I think it's just two things. One is the fact that I come from, a pretty humble background and have been lucky. I've had everything you could ever have in this country, and I see other people faced with insurmountable burdens and trying to do the same thing, and it just feels wrong to me. It feels like that's not right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the other part is it's become a very personal issue for me because of all the time that I've spent in community action centers and poverty centers, well over 100 around the country, just finding out what's going on and meeting with people.
And the last Democratic candidate who made this a signature issue was Robert Kennedy in 1968. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
And what I wasn't there, but when you read and what you hear is that part of his transformation, part of what animated him on this issue was the personal tragedy that he had endured in his life, and he connected with the suffering of others in that way. You've endured real tragedy in your life. Is that a factor in your empathy for people who are struggling to get by, and do you connect on some emotional level with people who are really suffering?
Oh, I don't know, maybe. I think that, I know that when I've got a million stories, but when I sit with somebody who tells me they have to put their children to bed at night with extra clothes on, with lots of blankets on them because they know they got to turn the heat off, and then they beg their children not to mention it when they go to school because they're afraid somebody's going to come take their children away from them. In America, how can this be? I do have that reaction, and I feel a strong personal bond, and I think it'd also just be fair to, I am by instinct for the little guy. That's just the way I am. I just always have been. I did it as a lawyer. I did it when I was in Senate. I've certainly done it in part as a presidential candidate.
You're not a Yankee fan, are you?
I ain't touching that one. So I think it's probably those things in combination.
The spiritual center of your campaign, the sort of emotional center, not where you're from, but I think the emotional center would be fair to say is New Orleans. You and I were there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I could sort of see it in your mood, and I think, every time, and people around who know you well tell me that every time you go there, it sort of affects you.
Yes.
Why is that? How did that come to be?
Because it is the perfect example of the inequality that exists in this country. And not only the inequality, but the incredible injustice of a community destroyed by a natural disaster. And still, today, at this moment, while we're having this event, in roughly the same condition. The upper and lower Ninth Ward, St. Bernard's Parish, the places that got hurt so badly. And it's just not, it's not right. And it represents, to me, the kind of challenges we face in this country. For America to be what it's capable of being, we can't live in an America that's made up of a few rich people and everybody else. We can't live in an America where those pictures we saw coming out of the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans exist in our country. We're better than this. And I believe that the spirit of America is better than that.
What or who's to blame for that inequality? How does it happen? What's the major contributing force there?
It's a very I wish there were a simple answer to that. There's not. It's a very complicated thing. I think it's fair to say that the Bush administration's policies have made this inequality worse on multiple levels. The failure to provide a safety net, the failure to taking away opportunities like access to college, tax policies that favor the wealthy and tend to concentrate wealth in a few people. I think all those things have played a role, but I think they exist in an environment, which is globalization, that has a similar effect. And so those two things act, I think, in combination. What happens is globalization, I think, stratifies class in America. It makes it much more difficult to move from low income to middle income to upper income. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I think one is that capital, money, and high levels of education are efficient and mobile. So people who are highly educated, who have a lot of money, they do well in ages of globalization because their money and their education can compete anywhere and do well everywhere. Everybody else struggles and are affected by competition around the world. So I think that the things we can do and affect directly here at home, things like universal health care, social policies to provide a safety net, housing policies that give people access to decent housing, policies to help people save, the right to organize and workers into unions. Those are all things that can have a significant impact here at home. But they're always until and if we, for example, are able to organize workers into unions in places like China, globalization will continue to have an impact.
And you're not against trade. This is an interesting subject for you because you've seen a lot of global poverty. I know you've traveled a lot around the world,
right.
And so you see two sides of that issue.
I do. And I think that if you look back instead of looking forward for just a moment, look back at the trade agreements we've done over the past 10 to 15 years, I think we've learned some lessons from them. I mean, among those lessons are that while it is enormously important for America to trade, we have to trade the right way, in a smart way. And that means there need to be labor and environmental standards in our trade agreements that are achievable by the country we're trading with. Otherwise, it's just a ruse for protectionism. Right. And protectionism is not good for America. It's certainly not good for America over the long term and not good for the world. I mean, you mentioned this, but one of the things that I've become interested in, I spent some time I've done some work in Africa. I've spent some time in the slums in India. And I think that we have a moral responsibility to give opportunity to people around the world, and blocking trade with developing countries is not the right thing to do.
Now it's interesting because when
I can add one last thing because I think it is an
sure,
important component. But I also would say that while there are widespread benefits to consumers from trade, it's also true that there's a group of Americans that are hit like a laser by trade. My father worked in a mill that's closed now. And it had a devastating effect not just on him, but on the community that I grew up in. And we have to have a social safety net that has to be there for those families and those communities. It doesn't exist today. The old social contract that used to exist really is largely gone, and it's important for that social contract to be there so that we don't just forget communities and families. You know, a 55-year-old man who's worked in a mill all his life or in a plant all his life can't be discarded. I mean, he has a pride associated with what he spent his life doing, and that deserves respect.
And when you talk to economists, and I've talked to a fair amount of economists about inequality, and what they say is, we don't have evidence that this kind of equality you're talking about actually affects the trend rate of growth. In other words, it doesn't affect the country's ability to grow it, and so it's not, they say we suspect that there's a steep social and economic cost, but nobody's really proved that it harms the country economically. And so the question becomes, do you have to make a moral argument about this? Do you have to go out and say to middle-class voters, I'm talking about poverty because it's the right thing to do, and is that a strong enough case, particularly in a general election?
Well, in the case of middle-class voters, they're directly impacted by this inequality too. The inequality is not limited to low-income Americans. I mean, middle-class, lower-income Americans are all directly affected by this inequality because the economic growth that's occurred in America over the last 6 or 7 years almost entirely at the very top. And that means if you're a middle-income family, which is where most Americans are, that your wages have been stagnant while the cost of everything you spend money on, health care, gasoline, college, et cetera, has gone up. And so they feel it. They feel it very, very clearly. I can go out, you may have been with me when I've done this. He's followed me some around the campaign trail.
It's kind of like stalking, actually.
But I can say to an audience in Iowa, for example, but anywhere, really, you can do it anywhere. In North Carolina, you can do the same thing. Any place. If you say to an audience, don't you love this crowd in Washington that says that we're having great economic growth? They'll laugh out loud.
Right.
Because they don't feel it. To them, even though the statistics are accurate, the statistics don't apply to them. So I think to answer your question, yes, there is a moral component to this. It's not right that we have 37 million people who wake up every day worried about feeding and clothing their children. That's not right. But there is, I believe, a social and economic component to this that's crucial also, which is America has been strongest and at its best when people are rising out of poverty, not going into poverty. 5 million plus Americans have gone into poverty in the last 6 years. When the middle class is growing and expanding and vibrant, America is stronger economically. And not only are we stronger economically, our democracy is stronger. So I think there is a moral component, but there's also a very clear societal benefit to it.
Now let's step back just for a second here, because when you talk about these issues of morality and obligation and poverty in the United States, in American politics, right, you set yourself up for allegations of hypocrisy. And you've had some of those in the last month or two.
No.
Yeah, no, I know you're busy and you don't see it, but you received, according to press reports, a haircut worth $400. It looks great, by the way. But what were you thinking exactly?
Well, let me say a couple things about it. First, it's led to a new line in my stump speeches now, which is we want to live in an America where you can go from nothing to paying $400 for a haircut. This is like most things in a presidential campaign. You've covered them enough to know that other people arrange these things, and I wasn't personally involved in it. But that didn't change
That person
anything.
is now being flogged somewhere in a basement.
No. Listen, mistakes get made. Ultimately, I'm at the top. I have to take it. This is like everything else. I'm responsible for it, so I'm the right person to be held responsible. But I will say this. I think that the only thing that troubles me about it, when I joke about it, and I do, the only thing that troubles me about it is the distraction from such serious issues. We have men and women dying in Iraq, and we're trying to choose the next president of the United States. We have, I spent all this time with families who are having trouble literally surviving, who desperately need a chance. And their life, every day of their life is life and death. We have mothers who wake up with a sick child and have no idea what to do because they don't have any health care coverage. That's the part about it that bothers me. It's fine to joke about it and all that, but if we, as long as we quickly get back to the really serious business that I think is at stake in this presidential election.
Well, before you were able to get back to the serious business, because then
You're not going to let me, huh?
Well, I am actually, but not for one more minute. And then there was a story about this hedge fund, which to my mind is a less frivolous story, because you worked for a hedge fund, 2006, that it turns out had invested in some of the practices, tax breaks, subprime lending, that you yourself have been very critical of. Do you regret having to, if you had it to do again, would you not go to work for that hedge fund?
I wouldn't say that. I think that if you were to look, I think that any kind of fair assessment of but my entire life. But let's talk about the period that you're talking about, which is the period since the last election up until now.
Right.
These are the things I've spent my life doing. I can list them. We'll start with yours. One, I did work for a hedge fund. I did it for two reasons. One was to learn more. I knew some, but to learn more about financial markets. And second, to have a job, make some money. Second, I ran the Poverty Center at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Third, I traveled all over this country helping raise the minimum wage. And we got it done in 6 different states. We were successful in 6 places. I put a college program in for low-income kids who otherwise would not have had access to college, which has been very successful. I'm very proud of it.
And which you're proposing nationally now.
I am.
As part
It's
of your
called College for Everyone. I traveled all over this country from coast to coast, personally involved in organizing workers into unions so that lower-income families could make a decent living. I went to Africa and did humanitarian work. I think it's hard to look at this in a fair way. And listen, everything you do is subject to criticism when you run for president. This is fair game. I'm not saying it's not. But I think if you put all those things in context, those are the things I've done over the course of the last 2+ years since the last election. I think it's pretty clear where my heart and my
If you'd had a few consultants, they would have told you
that
was a bad idea.
Maybe so.
You can go out and hire some. I'm sure they're standing by.
Yes.
You spend a lot of time raising money now, right? Which all candidates do.
I do.
Is that even a little bit fun, or is that just what you have to do? I mean, what's that process like for?
There's not much fun about it. It's I think that the reality is that to be considered a serious presidential candidate in today's world, you have to raise millions of dollars. If you don't do it, you're not taken seriously by the media. I think it's incredibly unhealthy. It's not for many, many reasons. One being, it shouldn't be a fundraising contest. I mean, we're choosing the next leader of the free world, the human being who we want to put our faith in, our trust in, to be honest with us, to lead us, to do the right and moral thing. And for that to be in part based upon how much money or how many rich friends you have is wrong. It's not right. Which is why we ought to publicly finance these campaigns, in my judgment.
Will you propose that as president?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we ought to publicly finance all these campaigns. None of these should be fundraising contests. But I don't want to sound holier than thou about it. You point out, and you're right, that both in the last presidential election and in this one, I've been involved in raising millions of dollars, as have all the other presidential candidates.
And you're running this is just something I noticed in traveling, you're running a carbon neutral campaign.
I am.
What does that mean? Is that you bicycling? You're not, I don't see you bicycling around the country, right?
Yeah,
There goes John Edwards. I mean, what?
No, we committed, I think, I may be wrong, I think one of the other Democratic presidential campaigns have agreed to do it too now. I think there are 2 of us. If I've left somebody out, it wasn't intentional. I believe that there are 2 of us now who are doing it.
I'll take the blame because I'm not aware of it.
Basically what it means is that we use lots of energy-saving devices in our campaign headquarters, et cetera. We try to drive, and just say this to the media, we don't always do it, but we try to drive more fuel-efficient cars. Remember, I'm jumping in and out of cars all over the country. And we purchase carbon offsets for, particularly, the most important piece is airplane travel, because it's the only way really to offset airplane travel. You can't do it any other way.
You purchase offsets. What does that mean?
That means there are people out there who are not carbon neutral, who are carbon positive. In other words,
so like me and my Jeep Cherokee, I could actually get money from you, just
I think that's more theory than real.
That's too bad.
But there are carbon credits on the market that are owned by people who are actually reducing the carbon as opposed to contributing to the carbon.
I see.
And basically what happens is you contribute, you buy their carbon credits.
Interesting. And what's going to happen when the Secret Service comes on? They're not carbon neutral.
No, they sure not.
Let me just ask you, I want to get to Q. I know you're going to have a lot of questions. Let me ask you one of the questions. You have 2 small children at home in addition to your daughter, right? You have Jack and Emma Claire are how old?
Jack's birthday was yesterday. He's 7. And Emma Claire is 9. Her birthday was in April.
That'd be an interesting
And
White
Kate,
House. Right?
just don't forget my older daughter, Kate,
Right.
who's 25. So.
We haven't had small children in the White House since, well, I guess, since the Carter administration and before that, Kennedy administration. What would that be like, do you think? Do they understand what the White House, what it would be like to live in the White House? And have you thought about what you would do to make that a more normal experience for them?
No, except that Elizabeth and I have already decided that starting this fall, they're going to actually travel with us on the campaign trail. And they'll be sort of tutored, homeschooled on the campaign trail. Because how many kids get a chance to actually travel around in a presidential campaign? So it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And my kids have done it before. So they're accustomed to it. Jack asks me all the time, when are we going back on the campaign, Daddy? I want to go on the campaign.
He loves the media, right?
Yeah, it's a scary thing. He does.
You tell your kids don't talk to strangers, and they just don't listen.
Well, I shouldn't tell these stories, but we would get on the campaign, the plane, and I'm sure some of you have a picture of this in your head, but we sit in one part of the plane, and the press sits in another part of the plane, and Jack would get on the plane and say, Dad, I want to go play with my friends. And I would say, son, those people are not your friends.
It's good advice. We've got about a half hour. I'm guessing there are a lot of questions.